deep within a dense sun-dappled forest far removed from human civilization, and absolute stillness enveloped the towering ancient trees. In this world, magic is not merely a rare gift, but an intrinsic element of daily life that defines an individual's worth from birth. Those born with multiple facial marks are revered as elites, while those with a single mark form the functional baseline of society. However, anyone born completely devoid of a magical mark is viewed as a genetic defect that must be strictly eradicated to maintain humanity's purity. Hidden away in a small, rustic wooden cabin within the deep woods, young Burnedead lived completely oblivious to these harsh societal laws. Because he possessed absolutely zero magical ability, his adoptive grandfather had spent years training the boy's body to extreme superhuman limits. Mash gripped a ridiculously massive rusted iron barbell that weighed several tons and began lifting it like a feather. After finishing his grueling morning routine, the blank-faced youth immediately turned his attention to his absolute favorite thing in the universe. His grandfather, Regro, walked into the kitchen with a heavy sigh, his single facial mark twitching with constant underlying worry. Regro strictly warned Mash to never venture into the nearby town, as his lack of a mark would instantly alert the ruthless magic authorities. Mash nodded in his typical deadpan manner, his mouth already completely stuffed with sweet oozing vanilla cream. The very next afternoon, however, the intense craving for a specific limited edition cream puff completely overpowered the boy's simple sense of caution. He quietly entered the local bakery and purchased the coveted pastry, blissfully unaware of the stares gathering around him. A sudden gust of wind caught his hood, fully exposing his unmarked cheeks to a passing patrol of elite magic police officers. Among them was Brad Coleman, a powerful and feared captain who immediately recognized the supreme taboos standing right before his eyes. Sensing immediate danger, Mash instinctively sprinted back toward the forest at a speed that defied basic human physics. He burst through the cabin door, finding his grandfather already trembling as the distant sound of marching boots echoed through the trees. Within moments, the front door was violently blasted inward by a surge of overwhelming destructive purple magical energy. Captain Brad stepped through the smoking threshold, his eyes cold and fixed entirely on the unblemished face of the young boy. Regro bravely threw himself in front of Mash, begging the authorities to spare his adoptive grandson from their cruel sentence. With a dismissive flick of his wand, Brad unleashed a powerful concussive spell that slammed the elderly man hard against the stone fireplace. Mash watched his grandfather slide to the ground, his deadpan expression suddenly hardening into something intensely focused. Brad smirked arrogantly and began incanting a massive lethal spell intended to completely vaporize the illegal markless youth. He launched a barrage of highly explosive tracking magical projectiles directly at Mash's chest with lethal velocity. Instead of dodging, Mash calmly raised his bare hand and casually slapped the deadly magical projectile completely away like a pesky fly. Brad's eyes went wide with absolute shock as he witnessed a mere human manipulate raw magical energy using basic physical impact. Refusing to believe his senses, the captain summoned an even larger, dragon-shaped manifestation of pure destructive force. Mash took a deep athletic stance, his incredible thigh muscles flexing so hard they shattered the floorboards beneath his sneakers. With a deafening boom, he launched himself forward like a literal missile, moving faster than the speed of sound. Mash delivered a brutal, straight physical punch that shattered the magical dragon into millions of harmless glittering shards. Before Brad could even attempt to cast a defensive barrier, Mash appeared directly in front of him, his fist hovering millimeters from the captain's nose. The sudden, immense wind pressure generated by the stopped fist completely leveled a massive swath of the thick forest directly behind the officer. Realizing he was utterly outmatched by this terrifying physical anomaly, Brad slowly lowered his wand, his cold arrogance completely crushed. Instead of continuing an impossible fight, the cunning captain's expression suddenly shifted into a sinister, calculating smirk. Brad proposed a highly unusual and dangerous deal that would allow Mash and his grandfather to live in absolute peace. He demanded that Mash enroll in the ultra-elite Easton Magic Academy and successfully claim the supreme title of Divine Visionary. The Divine Visionary is the single most prestigious title awarded annually to the absolute top student who excels in all magical disciplines. If Mash succeeded, the magic police would officially turn a blind eye to his illegal status and grant his family total immunity forever. Mash looked back at his bruised grandfather, then down at his own massive, unblemished bare fists with absolute, unshakable resolve. He accepted the impossible deal, fully aware that a single slip-up inside an academy packed with elite, hostile wizards would mean instant death. The towering stone arches of Easton Magic Academy loomed over thousands of hopeful applicants who gathered for the annual entrance examinations. Nervous whispers filled the crisp morning air as young sorcerers nervously clutched their expensive polished wooden wands. Standing perfectly still amidst the tense crowd, Mash casually reached into his black school uniform coat and pulled out a fresh round cream puff. He took a large, satisfied bite of the pastry, completely unbothered by the high-stakes environment surrounding him. Nearby students scoffed loudly at his bizarre behavior, pointing mockingly at his lack of any facial magic marks. Suddenly, the heavy iron doors of the main hall groaned open to reveal Examiner Claude Lucci, a high-ranking wizard with a sharp, arrogant gaze. Claude raised his silver wand high, instantly silencing the massive crowd with a single booming projection spell. He announced that the first phase of the exam would test their basic mental focus and raw magical manipulation through written papers. The applicants were ushered into a vast, cavernous hall containing thousands of wooden desks that stretched far into the distance. As the exam papers were distributed, the magical letters on the pages began to frantically rearrange themselves to confuse the students. Mash stared blankly down at his moving paper, completely unable to decipher the shifting magical runes. Deciding on a direct approach, he gripped the wooden pen tightly and channeled his intense physical pressure into the desk. Terrified by Mash's sheer kinetic intimidation, the magical letters on the parchment stopped moving and quickly aligned into a straight line. Mash easily filled out the answers with a steady hand, finishing the entire written test well ahead of his sweating peers. For the second trial, Claude led the remaining applicants to an open courtyard containing heavy, magically enchanted boulder weights. Students began using complex levitation spells, struggling immensely to lift the heavy stones even a few inches off the ground. Mash walked up to his assigned boulder, ignored his wand completely, and placed both bare hands beneath the massive rock. With a casual grunt, he hoisted the multi-ton boulder over his head with one arm and began repeatedly tossing it up like a toy. Claude's jaw dropped in utter disbelief as he watched the young applicant treat an ancient magical weight like a lightweight gym prop. The third phase brought the students to a massive, shifting magical labyrinth filled with dangerous traps and illusions. A fierce-looking applicant named Lemon Irvine approached Mash, offering to team up to find the exit faster. Mash simply nodded his head in agreement and stepped into the dark, narrow paths of the shifting maze. Suddenly, a giant stone wall slammed shut right in front of them, completely cutting off their forward path. Rather than turning back to look for another route, Mash pulled back his right fist and tightened his knuckles. With a deafening boom, his fist shattered the massive stone barrier into thousands of tiny flying fragments. Lemon stood frozen in absolute awe as Mash calmly walked through the rubble, creating his own straight line to the finish. Mash continued to sprint in a perfectly straight trajectory, pulverizing every single magical wall that dared to slide into his path. Watching from a scrying crystal orb, Claude slammed his fist down on his desk, furious that his elaborate maze was being utterly ruined. Within minutes, Mash emerged out into the central plaza, breaking the Academy's all-time record for the fastest labyrinth escape. The final stage of the entrance exam took place inside a grand courtroom-like chamber where the elite school faculty sat on high benches. At the center sat Walburg Bagan, the legendary and highly respected principal of Easton Magic Academy. Walburg looked down over his half-moon spectacles at Mash, sensing an incredibly strange aura from the boy. Claude stood nearby, eagerly whispering into the principal's ear that Mash possessed absolutely zero magical talent and should be disqualified immediately. Walburg raised a single hand to silence Claude, choosing instead to test Mash's true character with a high-level soul spell. A massive, terrifying magical phantom materialized from the floor, casting an overwhelming pressure across the entire room. The phantom lunged directly toward Mash, threatening to consume his very soul if he showed even a single hint of fear. Mash stood completely unmoved, casually raising his hand to slap the terrifying soul phantom across its face. The high-level magical construct instantly evaporated into thin air from the sheer kinetic force of the physical slap. A slow, genuine smile formed on Principal Walburg's face as he witnessed an anomaly that defied the very laws of their magic-centric world. He loudly declared that Mash Burnedead had officially passed the entrance exams and was formally admitted into Easton Magic Academy. Days later, Mash walked down the grand dormitory hallways wearing the official black robes of the Adler House. He held a brand new box of fresh cream puffs, looking forward to a peaceful school life of studying and baking. Before he could reach his room, a hyperactive student with wild red hair and a cross-shaped scar under his eye ran right into him. The boy introduced himself as Finn Ames, frantically warning Mash that a group of elitist upperclassmen were already plotting to target the strange new freshman. As if on cue, a cold, heavy magical pressure began to seep from the end of the corridor, snuffed out the nearby candles one by one. A sinister silhouette materialized from the darkness, a glowing wand pointed directly at Mash's chest, with lethal intent. The glowing wand tip pulsed with lethal light as Mash casually reached out and bent the solid wood into a neat pretzel shape. The sinister cloaked figure gaped in absolute horror at their ruined magical focus. Mash ignored the panicked attacker entirely, biting into a fresh cream puff he pulled from his pocket. The next morning brought the bright sunlight of the Academy's massive outdoor athletic arena. Dressed in standard athletic robes, Mash stood in a line of contestants on the emerald grass. A tall, smug upperclassman stepped forward, flaunting his ornate golden broomstick with a sneer. He mocked Mash openly, declaring that a commoner with no obvious talent would never leave the ground. The instructor blew a silver whistle, signaling all the participants to command their brooms to rise. Across the line, wooden brooms levitated instantly into the air as students chanted their levitation spells. Mash's broom remained completely motionless on the turf, utterly unresponsive to non-existent magic. Stomping his foot down with tremendous velocity, Mash created a localized shockwave through the dirt. The brute force of the impact caused the heavy wooden broom to launch violently upward into his waiting palm. The onlookers gasped loudly, completely fooled into thinking he had used an advanced high-speed summoning spell. The whistle sounded once more, and the competitors launched themselves skyward at breakneck speeds. Mash mounted his broom while still firmly planted on the ground, preparing his legs for a massive leap. Pushing off with superhuman energy, he shattered the ground beneath him and soared straight into the stratosphere. The other riders watched in absolute terror as a human missile zoomed past them with a loud sonic boom. To maintain his altitude without magic, Mash began kicking his legs at an impossible frequency in mid-air. This ridiculous flutter kick technique generated enough upward thrust to keep him perfectly level with the flying racers. The smug upperclassman tried to cut him off, using wind magic to create a turbulent vortex in Mash's path. Mash simply threw a powerful straight punch forward, completely dispersing the magical gale with sheer air pressure. With one final massive kick, he crossed the finish line ahead of everyone, shattering the school's historical speed record. The referee announced that Mash's victory had earned him a glittering silver Academy coin. Mash stared fondly at the coin, knowing it brought him one step closer to securing his peaceful life. Later that evening, 3 menacing figures clad in purple-trimmed robes blocked the path to the dormitories. Their leader was a vicious student from the elite Lang dorm, notorious for stealing coins from weaker students. He demanded that Mash hand over the newly won silver coin immediately or suffer severe physical consequences. Mash reached into his cloak, pulled out a warm cream puff instead, and offered it as a peaceful alternative. Insulted by the gesture, the leader used a spell to violently blast the pastry out of Mash's hand. Mash watched in slow motion as the cream puff fell onto the dirty cobblestones, ruined beyond repair. A dangerous, chilling aura suddenly erupted from Mash as his deadpan face darkened with genuine anger. The Lang delinquents felt the sudden, crushing pressure and instinctively took a cautious step backward. Before they could react, Mash vanished from sight, moving at speeds that defied human comprehension. He reappeared instantly in front of the leader, burying a ferocious fist deep into the bully's stomach. The leader flew backward through the air, crashing violently through a heavy wooden bench before stopping. The remaining 2 lackeys panicked and simultaneously unleashed a barrage of sharp stone spikes from the ground. Mash grabbed one of the rising stone pillars with his bare hands, snapped it off, and used it like a baseball bat. With their magic utterly decimated, the remaining bullies dropped to their knees, weeping and begging for mercy. Mash calmly searched their pockets, reclaiming his silver coin and taking 2 additional gold coins they had stolen earlier. From the deep shadows of the upper balcony, a mysterious, heavily scarred prefect watched the entire encounter with cold, calculating eyes. A sinister silhouette materialized from the darkness behind the scarred prefect, a glowing wand pointed directly at Mash's chest with lethal intent. The glowing tip of the sinister wand crackled with dark energy as it remained pointed directly at Mash's chest. Without blinking, Mash reached out with lightning speed and casually bent the reinforced wooden wand completely in half. The cloaked silhouette gasped in utter disbelief as the remnants of the broken weapon clattered uselessly onto the stone floor. Mash then pulled a perfectly intact cream puff from his heavy robes and took a slow, deliberate bite. By the following morning, news of a completely magicless student infiltrating the academy had spread across the entire realm like wildfire. Furious townspeople and elitist magic users gathered outside the grand gates of Easton Magic Academy, carrying banners and glowing staves. The protesters demanded the immediate execution of the boy who threatened the sacred magic-defying social order. Inside the courtyard, Mash's friends watched the escalating chaos through the iron bars with trembling hands. Mash walked calmly toward the main entrance, his heavy black boots clicking methodically against the cobblestones. A powerful wizard from the crowd stepped forward, instantly summoning a massive barrage of spinning fireballs into the air. With a fierce shout, the wizard hurled the blazing magical projectiles directly at the defenseless boy. Mash simply raised his right hand and began to slap each fireball away like a swarm of annoying bugs. The crowd fell into a stunned silence as the devastating elemental spells dissolved into harmless smoke. Another faction of elite magic users advanced, casting a joint spell that conjured a colossal stone golem from the earth. The stone monster roared loudly and swung its massive rocky fist straight down toward Mash's head. Squatting slightly to lower his center of gravity, Mash delivered a devastating uppercut right into the creature's arm. The sheer kinetic force of his physical strike shattered the entire stone golem into millions of tiny pebbles. Panic swept through the angry mob as they realized their most advanced magic could not even scratch him. Several corrupt academy instructors joined the fray, launching a combined wave of sharp wind blades. Mash began moving his feet so fast that he created perfect physical afterimages, effortlessly dodging every slice. He closed the distance in a fraction of a second, appearing directly in front of the leading corrupt instructor. Mash gently tapped the instructor's forehead with his index finger, sending the grown man flying back into a stone wall. The remaining attackers froze in place, completely paralyzed by the overwhelming physical dominance on display. From the school balconies, a large group of ordinary students began to cheer loudly for Mash's incredible victory. They saw that true strength was not determined by inherited magical marks, but by sheer individual willpower. The grand principal of the academy suddenly emerged from the main doors, his majestic golden aura instantly quieting the crowd. He announced that Mash would not be expelled, as his unique physical talents proved him worthy of competing for the highest title. The biased mob, realizing they had lost both the physical battle and the political argument, slowly began to disperse. Mash's closest friends rushed out into the courtyard, surrounding him with joyous embraces and bright laughter. Mash quietly pulled another cream puff from his pocket and offered it to his emotional companions. The deep-seated social prejudices of this magical world had finally begun to crack under the weight of his iron fists. Mash looked up at the highest tower of the academy, where the ultimate seat of power resided. He knew that his journey would only be truly complete once he claimed the title of Divine Visionary for himself. With his friends by his side and his absolute resolve solidified, the Magicless muscle prodigy prepared to rewrite history forever.